Okay, so welcome everybody. We're gonna start, and whoever is gonna join us will join us. We have about an hour, so we have enough time for everyone to join us whenever they can. So I would like to welcome all of you to this opening panel of the first Digital Eco Fashion Week. Starting today, all the future sustainable, ethical, and slow fashion brands collections are showcasing on designerstobuyers.com, who also produced this event. So thank you. We invite you to sign in and view this exciting collection. So today, our first panel is about the challenges and the opportunities for sustainable fashion brands during the COVID-19 period. So my name is Liraz Cohen Mordechai, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's panel. I'm a founder of a company called Fashionating by Leary. And before I even started with this company that I'll tell you a little bit about in a second, I actually worked in Inditex as the manager of the training and development department in Israel. And later on, I had my own fashion blog. But about 6 years ago, I watched a movie that I believe that all of you probably watched it, and it's kind of like a fundamental movie. The True Cost really gave me the understanding of what is the not the good things that's coming out of the fashion industry, and that completely shifted everything that I did. I opened my company, as I said, and the entire mission of the company is to empower and support local Israeli designers to succeed globally, and we do that through tours and programs and lectures and so on. But the mission and the values behind it, it's really about slow fashion, sustainability, inclusivity, and so on. Today, our panel is much broader than just the Israeli fashion industry. We're talking with global fashion designers from all over the world, and we will hear their perspective of everything that's going on today. But just kind of a recap of fashion, sustainability, and COVID-19. So prior to COVID-19 crisis, we already started to witness more sustainability programs and commitments in the apparel, the footwear, the textile industry, and in various segments, including luxury, sports, fast fashion, and value retail. The efforts were a combination between the environmental aspect and the social aspect, and it includes water, carbon, chemical consumption, but also workforce health, safety, well-being, and compensation. And we really started to see this trend evolving from many different reasons, from the consumer preferences and mainly the young generation to the climate disruption that made the fashion business model itself very vulnerable. Now, with COVID-19, that caused a huge shock for the entire fashion industry. We're talking about retail businesses who are temporarily closed, brands that are adjusting to declining customer spending, manufacturers all over the world face cancellations of completed and near completed orders. And this is something that already causing devastating ripple effects. What we're estimating that the crisis is expected to wipe out more than 30% of the fashion industry business in 2020 alone. Only in the US, we already heard about 27 retail companies that filed for bankruptcy. So enough with the good news. Let's talk with our four panelists who basically live, breathe, and sleep sustainability and fashion. And I want to hear from them what is their kind of experience and insights during COVID-19. So if each one of the panelists can just introduce yourself in 2 or 3 sentences, just giving us some kind of a background about who you are, where you're from, and what is kind of like your agenda. So Aude, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, thank you, Liri. Well, so my name is Aude Penouty. I'm from France, and I'm a fashion designer who became a cultural broker. So I will explain later on what a cultural broker is, but basically I've been working for 15 years and I spent 12 years abroad in Asia, in Italy, and in US. And 7 years ago, I started my own consulting office dedicated to sustainable projects, where I'm doing some sourcing exercise, product development. And 2 years ago, when I came back to Europe, thanks to my pretty wide experience, both in sourcing in factories, but also in developing products, in working with different kind of brands from everywhere. I also started to create some digital content for magazines and fairs and so on. So I do a lot of research from the very beginning of the chain to the very end when I talk to consumer.
Amazing, thank you. Rebecca, maybe you'll go second.
Hi, so I come to you from the United States, although I've also lived and worked abroad in Europe as well as in Asia. My background is in law and nonprofit management and advocacy, and I worked in that arena for a while before moving into sustainable fashion. I was a frustrated consumer who felt like I could not find the clothes that I needed in terms of the aesthetic that I needed for my values, vocation, and aesthetic. And so I decided to create them. So I created a company called Maven Women, and we have day to evening pieces. So the type of pieces that you can wear if you are a lawyer or a teacher or a doctor or someone who has kind of a more classic aesthetic. And you can wear them all day. And I'm wearing one of them right now. And we also engage thoughtfully in cross-industry partnerships. So my ultimate goal is to move the needle in the industry however I can, and Maven Women is certainly part of that. However, we love working with other companies and other nonprofits, and I look forward to sharing more about that work today, and also speaking some about the part that we can all play in banding together and using this terrible, terrible season for our world and finding some of the opportunities for change, realizing that even though there are some opportunities there, I think we need to be honest about the fact that there is great struggle and great suffering.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Camilla?
Hi, everyone. I'm Camilla Carrara, and I'm based in Milano, in Italy. I'm the founder and designer of ZEROBARRACENTO, that is a brand focusing on zero waste, gender-neutral outerwear. And my background is in fashion. And after a first bachelor, I decided to do a master in sustainable fashion. And starting from that time, I've been focusing on the zero waste pattern making technique and also on responsible sourcing, always with focus on made in Italy, because I'm trying to keep all the production chain as traced as possible. And before creating my own brand, I worked inside textile companies and consultancy companies for sustainability. So my focus has always been in textiles and fashion.
Amazing, thank you. So maybe Aude, maybe we'll start with you, the consultant here. Your company in Tata Textile, you consult various designers and brands and schools. What do you think is the biggest challenge now during COVID-19 period? Is it different than the challenges that your clients were facing prior to COVID-19, and in what way?
Yeah, it's definitely different because the size is bigger. As Rebecca said, it's a big struggle, and that's an international struggle. So I will just speak about France because this is where I'm staying right now. And there is many layers where companies have to really rethink the way they are projecting themselves, the way they are planning things. The first one is, I would say, it's to adapt to change and uncertainty, in a short-term moment, because they have to adapt to the short-term market reaction. So they noticed that they've been struggle because of the sourcing and production, which when it's abroad and when it's only abroad, it's a big problem. So for instance, in France, we have now a big campaign of localization to be able to produce and to make some things in France from the fiber to the final products. Another one could be that we were thinking production in terms of volume, and now the market is also going more and more for transparency. And basically, when a customer wants an information, they will be able to find it. So coming from volume production to valuable production, and how does it work to adapt yourself? And also another subject we've been talking about, you and I, it's how sustainability and digital tools are becoming long-term agile solutions and are not only opportunities. Sustainability for me is not a concept or a strategy anymore. It's an habit that companies have to catch up. if they want to stay alive.
Yes, completely. And what do you think about the designers? You mentioned in our previous conversation that young designers or small brands maybe have more opportunity here during COVID-19 rather than the big brands because they're more agile. Can you maybe elaborate more on this?
Yeah, exactly. They are more flexible in terms of strategy. They have less, maybe they have less incomes, but on the other side, they also have less, fees. So I think they are able to find a place and to go to sometimes to niche markets. When big companies, they have to consult all the layers. They have to be careful about the process in the company. Sometimes they have big purchase process and they have to rethink everything. So it's not so easy for them. When DNVBs, first of all, sometimes they are not coming from textile, which could be a bad point, but actually it's a very strong asset because they are coming to disrupt the market and they are able to create a collaboration with professional. And so their knowledge from marketing, from production, from engineering, whatever, combining to professionals, this is becoming something super strong on the market. And they're able to catch the very strong asset and the big importance of what is digital in today in terms of production, but also in terms of sales. So this is a big asset for them.
Yeah, Rebecca, I see you're kind of agreeing. And so both you and Camilla have your own fashion brands. I'm interested and curious to hear what you think about that. So Camilla, Aude mentioned the ability to be agile. Can you maybe tell us more about, first of all, what is your zero waste technique in your brand? And what are some major changes and challenges that you encountered during COVID-19 and how you adapted to the challenges?
Sure. So the zero waste pattern making technique is a technique that allows to use the 100% of the fabric while making the pattern making. And this means that at least 15% of waste is saved, because usually at least the 15% of the fabric is wasted during the production phase. So also for a small brand is really like about optimizing also the cost of production, because considering high quality materials, this could really impact on the final price of the production. And I'm super in agreement with the thing of saying that versatility is something super positive for small realities, because, for example, in our case, we are producing outerwear. So when we had the lockdown from March till almost June in Italy, we were totally shocked because we said no one will buy any more outerwear. There is no reason to do it. So we started rethinking a little bit what we could offer to our final consumers, and we started producing some kimonos, for example, that could be super suitable as loungewear, for example, but also for nightwear when the thing will happen again, when we were back to normal life. So we offered this possibility to choose the fabric, and then we were producing really unique pieces. So this is something that if you have really a big company with already established supply chain, it's not easy to do. But for us, it has been really just about rethinking a little bit our way to work and to find a solution that has really gave us the possibility to survive as well, because we needed to sell also during that period. And we were happy to find like an object that was giving value to the new life that we all were experiencing, because we wanted to bring a little bit the pleasure that usually we try to offer to our items, also with these new models. And we were happy to see our new customers satisfied, and also the way they were, let's say, wearing these new items. So it was interesting, and we are keeping offering this kind of product because we really saw that now consumers are more sensitive also to the uniqueness of the items, and also to maybe something that can be versatile in terms of use. So this is something that we are keeping on the side of our, let's say, conventional collection. So yeah.
Anything else that you're seeing from your customers that are asking in terms of sizes? You talked about the versatility, but I know in our prior conversation you mentioned also.
Yeah, we think that comfort is becoming more and more something that people are looking for. So we have always been offering something that is kind of oversized, but we saw that now is even more requested, and also all these fluffy wools for the winter that are more comfy and they hug your body. So it seems that people are looking for something that is really giving kind of a hug to themselves. So it's really like pleasure on pleasure. I don't know how to explain more, but it's true that there is really this need of finding pleasure while wearing something. So maybe buying a little bit less, but investing maybe something more. And when we spoke, I told you that I saw this sensitivity, measure sensitivity on like investment pieces. I hope it will keep being like this for a long time. I'm not sure, but I truly hope that all the values that we have rediscovered during this period will last.
That's super interesting. Patrick, I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Hi, good morning.
A brief introduction of each one of the panelists. So maybe you can just tell us in 2-3 sentences who you are, where are you located right now, what are you doing?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Cupid. I'm a women's ready-to-wear designer based in New York. And right now, we're in the middle of relaunching Spring 21, and then moving forward toward the next collection for Fall/Winter 2021. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I will get to you in a second, but Rebecca,
Sure.
maybe also address kind of what Camilla was talking about and some of the changes. For you, I find it super interesting because your brand, Maven Women, offers professional women's attire. And I'm not sure, do women still need professional attire today? We see rise in other categories such as athletic leisure, home decor. How are you adapting to this new normal? In what way you think the next collection will
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's a lot of questions. So first of all, I think if you are a brand that was founded based on sustainability, which we are, the goal isn't to just make as much money as you can as a brand. It is to serve the goal of sustainability in the industry. There are so many good sustainable athleisure brands today. I don't want to try and go after their market share when they are doing a very good job. That doesn't make sense business-wise, and it doesn't make sense in terms of the goals of us as a company. I can give some names, like Pact Apparel is doing a really beautiful job. They've been in this space for a long time. I love their pieces. They're extremely affordable. I'm not going to try and make a different legging than Pact Apparel is going to make. And there's so many other great examples for leggings out there. Like Girlfriend Collective is great. Somersault has some really nice pieces, and they are kind of went from the swimwear resort wear into athleisure, which makes a lot of sense. So, and I think asking yourself, are you going to wear athleisure all day long, every day, especially when the pandemic eventually subsides, which in the US could be a very, very long time? And the answer is no. As kind of the whole idea, like people want to wear something special. Do you want to wear your pajamas all day long, every single day? Well, maybe some people do, and that's fine. And we may adapt to a world where you're working from home and you can do that. And we've already seen that in some of the cities on the West Coast. You go to a place like San Francisco and people are wearing hoodies to work at Fortune 500 companies.
Right.
However, the requirements of people who are going into court are not going to change. The type of styles that certain women appreciate and enjoy are not going to change. You look at someone who's a fashion icon in the United States, like Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. She is still a fashion icon in this country. You're going to go out, whether it's to walk in the garden or on a date with your girlfriends or your partner. I think that we still need a variety of categories. I don't think people are going to be getting married in pajamas. Some people might, but probably most people won't.
Well, no.
Now, are people going to be spending a larger percentage of their time wearing athleisure? Probably. And are people going to be more comfort focused? Yes. And I think that's also another thing that's really important at Maven Women, because the type of clothes we create, there's been an emphasis on wearing things like pantyhose or stockings or shapewear and doing things that to me are just very uncomfortable and impractical. So I hope in the space that I'm in, some of those expectations for women that are uncomfortable, impractical, or not a good use of resources are changing. And people are looking for garments that are flattering, that are slimming because of the cut and the silhouette and the style and the type of material. You know, if are people gonna, if let's say we had a hypothetically 10% market share, might that change for our aesthetic? Might that change to go down to a 7% or even a 5% market share with the changes of the pandemic? Possibly. Does that mean that there's still no market? Absolutely not.
Okay, that's good to know. People are still wearing their professional attire, even if
Well,
they're.
and I'm not saying whether they aren't wearing it right now in this season to the same extent. However, I have friends who work in the corporate world. You can't wear pajamas on a meeting with a client.
And even in our, just if we're taking our panel just now, we are all dressed up in a certain manner, right? Like that's, even in the Zoom calls, we do care, even if it's just like on the top part of our,
Right.
we still.
Yes, a collared button-down shirt is what you're speaking in right now. And I think that the collared button-down shirt isn't going to just become a collared button-down pajama top for everyone all the time.
Thanks, Rebecca. Patrick,
Hey.
so you have your own brand, Patrick Cupid.
Yes.
Maybe you can share with us some of your challenges that you were facing during the pandemic or the start of the pandemic, and how you kind of adapted.
I think the first thing was it's actually been a little bit, well, I don't want to say it's been rewarding, but through the challenges, I think it's really just been about rethinking the way that the brand is moving forward, you know, and this has really been a great time for brands like my own to sort of reevaluate, like, do I make a pivot? Do I continue on as business as usual? I think there have been changes in the market and the industry that have been coming, for a number of years. We've seen changes in retail and the way that buyers have been buying and the habits, especially in like a lot of the bigger stores, like Lord & Taylor, Bergdorf Goodman, Bloomingdale. There's been a conversation around a lot of repetitive brands. You go out somewhere and then you see like the same 5 or 6 brands literally in every single store that you go to. And I started to notice that, over the prior 2 seasons, even before this year began, and I even had a conversation with my mentor about it, that maybe, direct to consumer needs to be a little bit of the way forward. We've seen it for a number of years with larger brands, beginning to do that, where they're opening their own flagship stores, and then a number of brands started to follow suit. For example, earlier this year, there was an article in the New York Times about Emily Bode, and she, was very big in Barney's and in a couple of locations. Well, unfortunately, Barney's is gone, but while that was happening, she had opened up, her own store, and I was lucky enough to go and meet with her wonderful woman, and sort of ask her and get some insight as to why that would happen. I've been showing as well for a number of seasons in Paris. And even walking through there, a lot of the newer or emerging French brands aren't even focused, on a wholesale model anymore. Like they have just been opening their own brick and mortar shops or going, online. I've seen the same thing in China. I was there last October for Market Week and meeting with a number of designers, and they have a big like online business, but most of their sales have been happening D2C. So when the year came in, I joined a trade show, went back to Paris, was excited. Unfortunately, Italy just shut down. As I'm boarding the plane, Italy's, shutting down. So everyone, it's like running to get out, like to get to Paris to the shows. But that really did impact, the number of people that were traveling because, people were afraid. People, sort of weren't coming out in the numbers that they normally did. Many, many, many brands like myself have seen like, cancellation after cancellation of appointment, really because I think people did not know what to do or what was going to happen, how long the quarantine was going to be on. Some buyers, were dropping orders, from people. Some of them have just completely gone out of business, which is really unfortunate. And so I when the time came, and I sort of saw this coming on, I sat back for a moment and said, okay, so this is happening, like the world is being forced into rapid evolution in the way that we do things, in the way that we approach business, in the way that we live, in the way that we communicate. And then I really started to look at some of the pros and cons. I think the pros are, to Camilla's point, is that people were then able to spend more time at home and look online, and they did discover new brands. Well, not only did they discover new brands, they were beginning to value, they were understanding more the value behind smaller brands and consuming less and buying better quality. Some people say, okay, well, it's more luxury brands, and that is part of it, or at least more expensive. But I really think it's just a turn to better quality. I think when you have time to sit back and reflect on things, we've seen boom in home decor. Why? Because people are spending more time at home now, and you realize, okay, I can fix the faucet, or I don't like my sofa. I want something better. And when you're at home and you're sifting through your closet and you have to get on a Zoom call for a meeting, there are a number of things you're thinking about. Do I really look good in this? Because, it's not just in the office on person to person, like, I'm wearing this, you're seeing me, and am I comfortable? Because I'm not going to be here, day to day. And so I began to think of, all these things and what we might be doing going forward. And then even about how my business was positioned. So I took the time and flipped my website and, started building, the e-commerce. I, joined up, with D2B, Designer to Buyer, and work with you guys and several others to really start focusing more on the online presence. It's not that I think brick and mortar is dead. I don't believe that. I just believe, it will have another iteration as time goes on. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. And Patrick, you have also experienced both in the US and in Europe, correct?
Yes.
And it's very interesting because number of you already shared your global experience. So it's just interesting for me to learn more about like the key differences that maybe Patrick, you can start the key differences that you see between these two places, Europe and the States, in terms of how advanced they are when it comes to sustainable fashion, and maybe how they're treating it now with COVID-19. And I'm curious to hear all of you after as well.
Okay. What I found, well, even just yesterday, I received an article. I follow the industry.fashion, and if you guys do get into the European market, especially United Kingdom, it is they're an amazing, incredible newspaper. So, please do check them out because they do a lot of research into the market, on influencers, on market trends, on what's happening with retail. They've been following COVID, like 19 step by step by step, and how it's affecting retail, the rents that people are paying. So it's a really great resource of like information to have. And one of the things that they're doing is a webinar on the new PLM systems that, work without coding, to sort of speed things up and streamline, the blockchain, and sort of make things easier. So I've seen a lot of that coming out of Europe. I think they're sort of, okay, well, we need to innovate, really quickly and get on it, and make these changes. Even in a lot of the showrooms, have, will automatically like, okay, well, we're going to be going to a digital platform, or how do we, swap this out? But I think these are things that everywhere, even in the United States, I think that people have been looking at for quite a while. As for sustainability, I think, Europe and United States are almost hand in hand. I think there's a lot more accessible, being in Italy for a while, there are a number, they've been recycling wool and fabrics and materials for a long time. You see a lot of high-tech design coming out of Italy as well, and that's because of the recycling program there, where they have access to all of these recycled, polymers, to make fabrics that do, amazing, incredible things, that they're able to turn out. And I think the United States could probably beef up, in that area more, with, a lot of either using recycled materials. I like a beautiful natural fiber, I can't, deny it, I just do. But there are some really great, recycled materials out there that can be accessed, depending on what the brand does. So whether it's athleisure or outerwear or, these other avenues, that we can really, really look into.
Right. Aude, I'm sure you have a lot to share with us in that in that matter, because you're the experts of all the materials, and you also have the global perspective as well. You work in Asia, if I'm not mistaken, and in Europe. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit?
Well, there is two things we can maybe highlight from Europe. First, in Europe, we have a lot of luxury brands, which understood pretty long ago that sourcing the raw material is 100% depending on biodiversity. So those brands, they really involved in that. Then during the COVID period, all the shops were closed, and at a different time, because in China, they've been under confinement before we did in Europe. In Italy, it was longer than in France, and so on. So they had to react pretty quickly on digital shopping things, on keeping the customer entertained by webinars, by all those social media, TikTok, all those kind of things. That's maybe a point that Europe was pretty reactive. On the other hand, maybe a less good point is that, for instance, some of my customers are fairs, like fabric fairs for lingerie or athleisure or other kind of things. For instance, one of the fair I'm working and I'm collaborating with, usually they have one fair in Shanghai, one in Paris, one in New York. They've been canceling all the fairs. So they had to react pretty quickly and to do online fairs, which they use the global network. It was pretty good. But in Europe, we are not as fast in reacting in terms of changing habits that US can be, I think. So we are very interested in digital things. All the webinars were given for free. That's amazing, really. But on the other hand, believing in it, believing in the immaterial thing, it's very difficult for Europe. We have great technologies, but we also has mindset. We are a bit behind sometimes. So those are the difficulties I could face, or I could testify.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the digital fair that you mentioned for the materials. How do you even do that?
So, for instance, one of the very important challenge now is to be able to produce and to think digital content, but with strong quality, like with visual, but also with technical thing. I'm not an expert, in IT and all those kind of things, but I've been participating as a speaker, as content provider for those fairs. So I recorded some webinars, for instance, gathering people from the sourcing chain. And at the same time, we were able to gather people on the chat. It was like a Tinder thing. So every of us, we were uploading a profile, and according to the interest we had and what we were looking for, we could match to suppliers, to consultants, to brands, and all those kind of things. So I had some very good meetings with fabric suppliers, for instance. And if the supplier was ready, like one of the lace suppliers that I know from Italy, they made the most beautiful video to present the new concept they had. So it was one kind of reaction. Then, thank God, the post office is still working on, so they can send, samples and swatches, so we can still have the feeling of it, because it's impossible to work on fabrics otherwise. But at least the first step of being in touch was a bit, thanks to those technologies.
Right. So we do see a lot of creativity and changing the mindset all over the world, right? I'm curious, Rebecca, what do you think? Do you think that any good will come out of COVID-19, maybe in the terms of the mindset of people, in terms of sustainability and fashion? What kind of the opportunities that you witnessed so far?
Yeah, so with all of the challenges aside, in terms of the opportunities, I mean, the United States is just awful in terms of consumption. We are the worst country in the world in our consumptive habits in many ways. And the pandemic has forced many of us, now not the whole country is not following pandemic protocols. There are some people whose lives have not changed. And that is why we have 5% of the world's population and 20% of the COVID cases. However, for many people, myself included, we've had to have a dramatically different lifestyle. And that has caused us to be more thoughtful and more intentional about so many of our choices. And so many of the avenues for consumption are no longer available. You can't go to a brick and mortar store and go on a buying spree in the same way now. So realizing that all that is fraught and complicated. And another thing is, so many people have been really just dumping old clothes at places like Goodwill that then will be shredded or discarded in global markets in places like Haiti that don't need more and more piles of American rejects. Nobody wants this, American sporting shirt that has sweat stains on it. So I mean, you know the deal, right? They're
Yes.
like, listen, I'm Haitian and I dress better than you in America, which is true. So, and I have a number of Haitian friends. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities here. Best case scenario. Okay. Best case scenario is that the country as a whole
Best case scenario
do with the pandemic, which is honestly going to take a new precedent. So if the country and not to get overly political, but it will take that. So if Biden is elected and the country as a whole does what it needs to do during the pandemic, and we all hunker down, it's going to suck. It's going to be terrible. People are going to go through all kinds of awful things. It's going to happen over the winter for a lot of people who haven't done it yet. However, I hope that brings about a sustainability renaissance when people are rethinking about their habits, rethinking about what's important to them, not having the same avenues for purchasing quickly and disposing quickly, and being more thoughtful about what do they need. And it's a reset, because this country really needs that reset. Another asterisk that I'm going to add to that I think is very important to talk about in the American context as well as the global context is Black Lives Matter. And I think that movement is it's so important to speak to the specific challenges faced by people who are Black in this country. And clearly I am not someone who can speak in as in-depth a way about this as many other people. But I have done public defender, criminal defense work in this country. And I'm trying to become well-versed on some of the issues and have for some time. And there's a lot of great resources to learn more. And the intersectionality piece of it all is realizing that fashion in the United States has been based on exploitation from the very beginning. You had more people who were working at the start of the Civil War in slavery in this country on fashion than you did at the height of the transatlantic slave trade, because that slave trade shut down, but then you just used women's bodies to create more people and working on this. So another hope of mine is the people context of it all. What does sustainability mean in terms of caring for people's lives? And that's also something that I'm working on. So stay tuned, follow along, reach out if you want to chat more. But that's another cross-industry piece that I'm working on now, is thinking about how do we take some of these social movements in this country and bring it into fashion, and realizing that we're used to cheap products because we're used to slave labor. And we've had it throughout the history of fashion in this country. And we are just in the process now of shutting down things coming from China with the slave labor and the genocide of the Uyghur population there. 20% of the world's cotton is coming from that part. So I could chat for a while about this topic, but I hope that there's an intersectionality piece. And I also don't know if Black Lives Matter would have come about in the same way if there hadn't been a pandemic too.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful, and Patrick, you're going to be like, I love your thoughts on that as well too.
No problem. Yeah, no problem.
I see a lot of nodding, and also feel
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
that you're like, listen, she might not be on it.
Yeah. I
Patrick,
think,
perspective.
yeah, sure. Rebecca, you touched a lot of like really, really good points, and I agree with you on so many things. Um, you know, First with like the whole issue of sustainability in the country, like even the term sustainability, like I think needs to evolve and change because
Absolutely.
it's so broad that there's really no definition as to what that means. And a lot of companies, a lot of brands, both big and small, throw that out, or people are asking these questions, or how are you sustainable? And I find that it's not really that they want to know how we're sustainable. It's like people are trying to understand exactly what that means. Are you using recycled fabrics? Is everything natural? Will it biodegrade? Are you taking care of, people and making sure that they get fair wages, like so that we're not, promoting, slave labor? It was Karl Lagerfeld who said years ago, if you're going to work in fashion as a designer, you have to accept a certain amount of injustice, in the world. And though it may have been right for the time, I don't agree with that, and I think that, if we sort of really push to change, that we can make that happen. I think there needs to be a re-education for the consumer, especially in the United States, to your point with the overconsumption, but also for the designers and for the companies and the manufacturers. We go out to buy small brands are having a really hard time because, we go out to purchase fabric, and then there are these, crazy, minimums that unfortunately a lot of, of us are not going to be able to do. And when you have that, then you're forced to buy, you're forced to produce more, you're forced to overproduce. And a lot of that winds up as just waste. We see it in mass market where they're producing millions of units to fill all of these stores, and it's the same thing. Half of it is never, going to move or go anywhere. So it will wind up in Haiti or, somewhere in Africa or wherever else where they're going to dump, the rest of these clothes, like Salvation Army's been doing for years. And like, we need to think about that. We need to say, okay, well, you know what? No, I'm not producing 2 million units. My customer is there. My customer is specific. And hopefully I have 2 million of them spread out all over the world, but I don't need 2 million units right now just for New York City alone. Like that's a little bit excessive. It's a bit much. And keeping your clothing longer. Growing up, I would see my grandparents who were for different age, and they too worked in the garment industry, and like so did my mother and father. And there was always a sewing machine in the house. There was, we would go to the shoemaker when we were little, and like, you'd have your shoes repaired or the soles fixed or the shoes cleaned, or you'd have your coat mended or things like that let out. Seville Row, where there's tailoring, where a lot of the men, it becomes a generational thing where you inherit your grandfather's or your great grandfather's, blazer or jacket. Sorry, I've got the sounds of New York going. Blazer or jacket. And you basically go back and have it retailored or retooled to fit you, and then it carries on, and then you pass it on again. So creating this kind of a special bond between the consumer and their purchases, I think is also really, really, really important. Like having these heirloom pieces would help. To touch on Black Lives Matter briefly, Rebecca, don't ever feel that you can't speak to that or that you can't say that. I think other people, aside from, I'm a Black male, and what makes me happy and what excites me is to see someone who's not another Black person to go in and speak and understand it, or want to understand like the conversation around it, because it adds validity. It makes the conversation real, not just something that's happening, at your neighbor's house. And, well, I don't really know what's going on. When you become part of the conversation, then, people begin to see like, okay, this is really happening. And I think to the point with COVID-19, it sort of put everyone, because everyone is at home and they're seeing what happened to George Floyd, and they're having time to read the articles and get the information and understand, oh, okay, wait a minute. This wasn't just this frustration or like, you know, this thing that was happening with these other people. Like there is something to this there. And so what is this? Let me dig a little bit deeper. Let me find that out. And I think that's also happened, you know, and I think that's really where the movement, because the movement was going on for a while, but I believe that's where it really exploded. It's once people on the outside sort of got involved and said, wait a minute, we don't agree with this either. Like, this is not okay that this is happening. Why is this happening? How long has this been going on? You know, this is not something that just died off with Martin Luther King and other people. And it affects not just, you know, when we say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't just affect, okay, well, you know, the police brutality and the killings and all other things. It also affects the way that we're treated in the workforce, you know, in the fashion industry. You know, Black designers or designers of color, I should say, have been really pushing the needle, you know, especially in the United States, you know, for American fashion and influencing. I think about Stephen Burrows and Versailles 76 and how that changed the way that we present fashion and how we see runway shows and all of those, you know, beautiful Black women that went out, because most of the American designers could not afford the top models because they were already working with a lot of the French designers in that competition, you know, and it's out there, but we don't talk about that, you know, and yet they've changed the world for us in fashion, you know, as a whole forever. And for years and years and years, you know, they would still not get the recognition. They would still not get the space, you know, in the show. It happens to women of Asian descent, you know, in the modeling industry. How often do you see an Asian woman that's the face of a cosmetic brand or something else that someone uses, getting hired for work, or, you know, having buyers, you know, come and meet a designer, you know, or when they, you know, for example, people come and look at me and they make an assumption based on what I look like about what I design, you know, or, you know, they see the design and it's just like, oh, wow, it's like this big shock. And it's just like, well, why can't I? You know, why wouldn't you have just automatically connected that? Or why would you have any assumption at all? And it's because of the stigma of racism, you know, that even goes down into just the way that we treat each other and the way that we look at each other. And all of these things have to change. Like, we have to do better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I see Aude is also absolutely agreeing. And I think you're absolutely right. When we're talking about sustainability, the whole idea of the definition of it, it's so wide, and it's not just the environmental part, it's about the human beings who are part of it. It's the way we treat others. It's so many different things. We don't have a lot of time left. I'm going to say that if anyone in the audience have questions, you can write them down in the Q&A part, and we will take one or two questions. But just to recap, maybe Camilla, you can give us some tips of how to prepare ourselves, as I'm sure we have a lot of designers here in the audience who are listening. What can they do to adjust to this new situation, and what kind of opportunities do you recognize right now?
Sure. First of all, I would like to say that something connected to what has been said before, so that the positive thing about the pandemic is that it brought an highlight on many values that were a little bit not on focus till that moment. So I think we had the time to rethink a little bit our lives, all of us, because we were all running and without thinking too much. And then at one point we were locked and we had to think of what we were doing. And it's good that many discussion raised. And I think this is extremely positive. And now as consumers, we need to keep thinking of it, but also as designers. And I think it's a key moment to work more in partnerships, because I think we all cannot survive by ourselves. So I think we need to create more a systemic cooperation, let's say, between countries, obviously, but also as more designers. Maybe we need to stop being so, I don't know, trying to make better than others, but maybe make something together and exchange a little bit more the knowledge. I think all the online discussion that have been free during the pandemic have been super positive, but now we need to keep working in this direction. also because maybe my problem is something that the others have already experienced. So I think this is fundamental. And also try to not exaggerate now. Now we all need to keep working definitely and make projects, even if it's not so easy, because maybe we are a little bit negative and we have been investing a lot and maybe not getting big value. But I think it's the moment to show that we have additional values. And also, like after the COVID, McKinsey has published a report saying, for example, that consumers will return more quickly to pay full price for quality and timeless goods. So this is really extremely positive. So we need to keep the values that we have re-elaborated and focus on those.
Mhm.
Yes. Aude, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I like the fact that you highlight the systemic approach, because that's something I really focus on now. Because as Patrick said, sustainability, it's a very large word, and sometimes it's not precise enough. And for me, sustainability is using three dynamics: the fabric sourcing dynamic, the production dynamic, and the distribution or redistribution dynamic, in where you have diversity. That's a very important point. And we saw that during the pandemic, all the strong sportswear brands from US like Reebok, Nike, Adidas from Germany, they're really involved during Black Lives Matters in doing special campaigns. They had to. And today the brands, they cannot stay in silence. That's not possible. So they have to involve in those three dynamics. And another point that I wanted to say, and for the sourcing thing that you mentioned, Patrick, actually there's that you have some mutualization things and dead stock possibility purchase. And in the chat, I put one for you.
I saw, thank you. Yeah.
And I don't know if you know it, but maybe it could be a solution for you.
Thank you.
Already a collaboration. I love it.
Yes.
Well, we're running out of time. So I will say thank you for all of our panelists. You surely gave us some hope, and you're doing, each of you, amazing work in your own segment. And it's just, I can say personally, when I had to read your bios and I talked with some of you prior to this panel, it was just super inspiring. So keep up the good work. Keep up making everyone else aware of the importance of sustainability in our world. And hopefully we'll all get better on the other side of COVID-19.
Yeah.
This is the first part of this whole week of Eco Fashion Week, so Digital Eco Fashion Week. So if you want to stay and learn more, the website, you can read more about all of the other opportunities you have for the next days. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I wish you health and creativity. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
pleasure
you.
meeting you guys and sharing
Pleasure
today.
meeting you. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.